Mommy? Mommy?
Iris, what's wrong, sweetheart? What are you doing here? My daughter had literally taken over an hour to get to the hospital where I'm staying, on foot. Why is she here when she's supposed to be with her daddy? As I listened to my daughter's story about what was going on for the last few weeks, I found out my husband had been lying to me and put his own daughter in danger. I hired a detective who is an old friend of mine to launch an investigation to uncover his lies. And this story is about how my husband betrayed his family and how he paid for that mistake. My name is Cassandra, but many call me Cassie, and I'm a 30-year-old office woman working as executive manager of the Department of Product Manufacturing for a household items company. My job basically consists of keeping constant communication with the factories that make our products en masse. And while I do have to shoulder lots of responsibility, the people whom I collaborate with are awesome business partners, and some are actual friends outside the workplace. All in all, a very good job. I used to live with my husband, Grant, and our daughter, Iris. My husband and I both worked, but because I knew we were going to have a child when we first got married, I looked far and wide to find a job with little overtime work. I should count myself lucky that I found the company for which I work now, because I had no extra hours during the night on weekdays. I spend a lot of time with my daughter, and my husband often goes out with her on his days off to compensate for the lack of time he spends with her during the week. That's why she loved him so much. But recently, my husband has been saying that he's busy at work, which is why he's not at home more and more often. I was always wondering why, since he had never worked overtime before. And while a part of me scolded myself for being suspicious, I couldn't help it. He suddenly started working overtime and on holidays, and it happened very suddenly instead of gradually. I have a friend who's a detective, and I was thinking of asking him for help. Then one evening, my husband came home and asked me and my daughter if we wanted to go on a little family trip for the upcoming holidays. A trip?
What with work and all, we haven't been able to make time for our family lately, so I thought it would be a good idea once in a while.
I get to go on a trip with Mommy and Daddy. I'm so happy. Where do you want to go, Mommy?
If we go on this trip, sweetheart, we're only going to a place you want to go to, okay? She was so happy to hear that and started talking about where she wanted to go. I had nothing to be suspicious about. Grant was simply really busy with his work, but this idea of his made me realize that he was still thinking about us all the time. All my doubts about him disappeared. But 1 week before the holiday trip we were looking forward to, I fell ill at work. I had been feeling under the weather around then, but I just thought it was just a lack of sleep. But in fact, while it wasn't life-threatening, I was diagnosed with an illness that required surgery. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I was looking forward to this trip very much.
Oh, it's all right, Mommy. I'm more worried about your health, so don't worry about it. Just get some rest, okay? I'm going to visit you a lot with Daddy. Won't we, Daddy?
Thank you, darling. Grant, honey, do you think you can take care of Iris for the time being?
Of course. Never you mind. I have everything under control. You just get some rest, all right?
Both of them were very understanding. So I stayed in the hospital and focused on my treatment, even though I still felt sorry for them both. For the last week or so of my stay in the hospital, Iris and Grant came to visit me every other day. She spent a lot of time just talking about what happened at school the last couple of days, and it made me happy. Because the scenery never changed, being in the hospital was so boring. I was certain I would emerge from the hospital physically healthy, but clinically insane. As soon as my husband and my daughter walked in through the door to my room, made it feel as though the hospital room was a dreamland. And once my daughter and husband leave, the boredom settles in again. It takes about an hour to walk from our house to the hospital. My stay in the hospital was to be at least a month, and I was very anxious because I've never been away from my daughter for any amount of time, even remotely close to that. Because the hospital was so far from where we lived, I couldn't see Iris very often in the first place. And then something happened that made me even more anxious. My husband and daughter stopped coming to visit me, and to pile on the bad news, at the same time, I seemed to be disconnected from Grant. I just couldn't get through to him over the phone. I sent him messages too, but either he never read them or they never reached his inbox. On the days I couldn't see my daughter, I always used to call them, using Grant's video phone to see her face, but he couldn't do that anymore. I don't know if maybe it was because he was having a hard time taking care of her, but I was nevertheless worried about whether things were okay or not. A week passed, and still, no phone calls. 2 weeks after I was hospitalized, my husband picked up the phone for once. Oh, thank goodness! I finally got through to you. Grant, how are you? How's Iris?
I'm doing all right, and Iris is doing great. Sorry about the incommunicado. I've been pretty busy with work these days.
Where's Iris? I want to see her face. Is she still awake?
Sorry, honey. I put her to bed about an hour ago. She had soccer in her PE class today, and she was so tired. I'll check on her again and try to get back to you.
Oh, okay. Too bad. I miss her so much. Can we make a video call right now? It's been a while since I've seen the house, and I feel so relieved to see it again.
Sorry, I'm still at the office right now. I went home to check on Iris, and after I put her into bed, I came back. Mind if I call you back?
After I answered no, he hung up on me. I tried calling him several times over the next few days, but the same problem of incommunicado persisted. I was concerned about my daughter's condition, but not being able to leave the hospital was very frustrating. One day, after days of agony, I heard fast-paced footsteps running down the hallway of my hospital room. The footsteps passed by my door and then stopped, and approached the door again from the opposite direction. I apparently had a visitor. And then I heard the sound of crying and sobbing. The voice was familiar to me. There was no doubt about it. The voice belonged to my daughter. Mommy! Mommy! Iris, what's wrong, sweetheart? What are you doing here? Did you walk all the way here?
I walked all the way here by myself. I knew the way because I came a few times with Daddy.
According to Iris, had literally taken over an hour to get to the hospital where I'm staying, on foot. Why did you come alone? Where's Daddy?
Because Daddy is not at home.
He's not at home? What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked her if she meant he hadn't come home yet because he's busy at work, and she said no. He literally hasn't been home at all recently.
I wondered why he bought me lots of boxed lunches and bread and stuff that I liked, but I thought that Daddy was never going to come back. I understood. I feel so lonely being home alone, Mommy.
She began to cry. To sum up everything, she told me Grant was not at home and Iris had spent the last few days all alone in the house. In other words, a child in elementary school, 8 years old, was home alone, eating boxed lunches and assorted sweet bread. When I called Grant a few days prior and he answered, it wasn't that Iris was sleeping, that I couldn't see her, it was that Grant simply wasn't with her. She must have felt so alone, so scared, and so confused about why she was alone. She didn't have a cell phone, which meant she couldn't call anyone, and she thought the only solution to the problem was to go to the hospital herself, and that's why she had to walk all the way from her home. My heart wrenched at the thought of such a calamity, and the anger I felt towards Grant was enormous. What exactly did he hope to accomplish by leaving our daughter alone in the house for multiple days? I hugged her and tried to calm her down. Perhaps the physical labor of walking a whole hour got the better of her. Because she fell asleep on my bed next to me, her head on my chest, I took the opportunity to call Grant, and for some reason, he answered the phone almost immediately.
Cassie, what's wrong?
What are you doing right now?
I'm having a nice dinner with Iris. What do you want?
Obviously, Grant was in a bad mood because I'd called him at the moment. I didn't care. I just kept on talking. If you're having dinner with her, can you put her on? He said nothing in response, and he was clearly upset when I said that. His breathing suddenly became heavy and erratic. If you're going to lie, you better lie in a more convoluted way, my dear man. Of course I'd ask him to give the phone to Iris if they were eating together. Now I conclusively knew my husband was lying to me, and that's all I needed to know. You know what? Never mind. I have a big headache. Glad to know you're spending time together, though. Call me again when you can, I said before hanging up the phone. I knew his bad mood was gone just before I killed the line, because his breathing returned to normal, and his tone was calm and soothing when he said,
Take care of yourself.
I supposed he was relieved that he didn't have to give Iris the phone. I was so disgusted with him. After hanging up the phone, I called my parents. I couldn't trust my husband with Iris anymore. I explained the situation to my parents and asked them to take care of their granddaughter. They were thrilled to take her under their wing for a bit, and I knew they would. Iris hadn't seen her grandparents in nearly 6 months. I also urgently asked a detective, who was an old friend of mine, to launch an investigation to uncover his lies. Lo and behold, he called back 15 minutes later with a tiny update. The evidence of Grant's infidelity was rolling in astonishingly quick. I can't thank my friend enough for investigating so quickly, and I urged him to find everything he could. My husband had neglected our daughter and was indulging in adultery with another woman. I was beyond angry by that point. I was disgusted. I didn't tell my husband that my daughter was at home. Still, the fact that I haven't heard from him obviously means that he hasn't come home. To think that it's been a few days and he still hasn't come home is far more dreadful than anything I've ever experienced in my life. I was afraid that Iris may have been alone for a longer time than I was thinking, and the mere thought of it sent shivers down my spine. Some of these shivers consisted of fear of all the things that could have gone wrong while Iris was alone in the house. Some others were of pity for Iris for putting up with that scary time. Others were still of fury towards Grant for doing the unthinkable. But Iris is at my parents' house now, which is a big relief. Then, a few days later, my husband came running into my hospital room.
Hey, Iris is gone.
What do you mean she's gone? If she was there this morning, you could have called the school, right? I told him that, and he was clearly getting impatient. Let's make him even more nervous. Or maybe call the police. She hasn't come to the hospital, honey, so I have no idea where she is. Want me to call the police?
Actually, I think it would be quicker and less of a hassle to ask around the neighborhood instead of going straight to the police. Where is Iris likely to go?
Normally, anyone would feel more comfortable telling the police right away and letting them take care of finding her. But Grant actually refused to go to the police. Yep, he was only thinking of himself. Absolutely pathetic. Iris is not coming back, Grant.
What the hell do you mean?
Iris came to the hospital room alone a few days ago. When I said that, my husband obviously started to get upset. She came here alone because you abandoned her at home and made her feel so lonely. That's why I've asked my parents to take care of her. That's what I told him, making sure the words all sounded like bullets because I wanted to destroy this man's soul.
Then you do know where she is. Why didn't you tell me earlier?
But then he took offense. But I wasn't fazed by that in the slightest. Can you please explain to me why I have to tell you to make you understand? Normally, you'd have known she was gone sooner, right?
I was busy with work.
If you're really too busy with work to even come home at all, you could have called me first, or your in-laws, or your own parents.
Well, I mean, that's...
Well, that's okay, because I already have it all figured out. I proceeded to spread out all of the evidence my detective friend had gathered for me in front of him. The moment he realized what exactly he was looking at, his eyes went wild with panic. But really, the reason why you didn't even notice your daughter was missing was that you were busy having an affair, isn't it? You failed as a husband, as a father, and as a man in general, Mr. Grant Scallion.
No, that's not cheating. That's just a junior colleague at work who told me she needed some advice. So all I ever did was listen to her concerns.
I think that excuse is still going to hold up when you take a freaking look at this. I offered my husband a photograph of the two of them coming out of a hotel. When my husband realized he couldn't use that excuse, he fell to his knees. I want a divorce.
Divorce? No, please. Anything but a divorce, please. I was just having some fun with her. I was never serious.
You weren't serious when you left your own daughter to have an affair with her. What were you gonna do if something happened to my daughter while you were off gallivanting with that bitch clutching your arm like that? I can't be with a man who leaves his daughter and then goes off to someone with whom they're only having some fun.
But you know Iris is not going to have the best childhood if she only has a single parent.
I don't believe the same individual who literally abandoned her in an empty house alone and scared has the right to say such things, Mr. Scallon. The divorce is final, and I'm not going to change my mind. I've asked my parents to hire a lawyer, and we're going to be negotiating the legal procedures through them. I never want to see your pathetic face again. At that instant, my parents came into the room, Iris holding Mom's hand. When she saw her daddy, she started shaking and retreated behind her grandmother, hugging her legs and digging her fingers into her pants. She must have been traumatized from being left alone in a large house for multiple days. My heart started to pound in my chest as I fought back tears at this devastating sight. My own daughter was frightened of her father. I mean, sure, he freaking deserved it, but no child should ever feel that way towards their parents. It's so heartbreaking.
I'm scared, Grandma.
Do you understand now? This is what you did to her.
But I made sure she had plenty of food because I knew she wouldn't be able to eat anything if I left her alone with nothing at her disposal. What's your problem with that? Nowadays, it's becoming a lot more widespread to leave elementary school children at home to fend for themselves for a bit. It helps with independence and autonomy, you know.
My husband actually started to attempt to justify his actions for leaving her at home alone. Iris started to cry when she heard her father's words. Mom kindly took her out of the hospital room, and Dad gave Grant the look, a look of soul-crushing judgment. I never thought he'd be able to say such a thing in front of his daughter. Of the two things I was furious with him about, the affair and his neglect of Iris, the latter was infinitely more important, and the fact that he was trying to prove he was in the right made me struggle to keep my murderous intent from taking over. Iris crying made it especially hard. I swear, another slight nudge in the wrong direction and I would have lost all control. So that's how you really feel. These are the true feelings of a lousy man who values cheating on his wife with another woman more than his family. No wonder you left your daughter behind. You really think your crimes are alleviated because you left food for her? Scallon, how frickin' cruel and disgusting can you get? What kind of a man who leaves his daughter to fawn over a woman is just going to reopen his mouth? What you did is something that could have gotten you arrested by the police, and I'm not kidding. Perhaps Grant finally realized the gravity of what he had done when I mentioned the word police, and he agreed to the divorce, but his stupidity didn't end there.
I'll agree to the divorce, but you have to let me see Iris. If you don't agree to that, I won't pay you child support.
I don't want child support. I don't want money from someone who's going to make money a condition to see his daughter.
Then I won't do it. I won't.
By all means, Mr. Scallon, don't. We don't want anything to do with you. As long as you don't ever show your face to me or my daughter again, I'm all for that idea. Right. As I said that, my parents-in-law came into the room. I guess my own parents called them.
What do you mean you won't pay child support? That's the stupidest bullshit ever heard.
You did something that should make you feel ashamed as a man. And paying alimony and child support is axiomatic. You should be paying double the normal amount of child support and double the amount of alimony by conventional standards. It's not that you should pay that much. It's that you will pay that much. I'm really sorry about all this stupid shit, Cassie dear.
Don't freaking tell me what to do. I'm not gonna pay you anything. Not a single penny. You hear me? Then don't ever call yourself my son again. I'm freaking disowning a piece of shit like you. I'm ashamed you were ever my son. You're crazy.
You're the one who's crazy. You bastard. I'm ashamed that Cassie is still seeing your face.
With that, my husband was dragged out of the hospital room by his parents. A few hours after they left, my lawyer came to see me, and together we finished up the legal procedures to demand Grant alimony and child support, and he took care of most of the rest. My in-laws were very cooperative, needless to say, and the result was that I was able to get more money than the conventional standard, just as Miss Scallon said I would. My husband's lover was indeed a junior at his company, and my detective friends sent a certified letter to that company. I'm still so grateful to my friend for finding that much evidence against Grant's infidelity, and I owe so much to him. Thanks to the content-certified letter, the woman was transferred to a regional office somewhere in the countryside on the outskirts of some remote town, and my husband was assigned to work next to a window, which is to say he's only taking care of miscellaneous things and isn't actually doing real work. I also demanded alimony from the woman whom Grant was having an affair with. She was insisting on not paying, so we contacted her new workplace through my lawyer, and we arranged for the money to be deducted from her paycheck. Because Grant had been having an affair at work, and it's hard for him to stay working there right now, the woman who he had the affair with seems to be holding a grudge against him because of my demanding alimony from her, and spreading the contents of their messages, photos, to their head office. The alimony was paid to me in one lump sum, and she quit the company soon thereafter. I don't know what she's doing now. My husband also paid alimony and child support in one lump sum, so I never had to see him again. And I was discharged from the hospital without further complications, perhaps 10 days after the whole situation blew over. After I left the hospital, we went straight to my parents' home. I decided to stay with my parents for a while, because I was afraid my daughter might miss me if I went back to work immediately. When I told my daughter that her daddy and I had divorced, she said,
If you're there for me, Mommy, I'm so happy with that. That's all I want. And even if you get lonely, I'll be here for you.
She was the one who had suffered a traumatizing experience of being abandoned alone in a large house. But her words were so kind and so brave that it made me realize how grown up my little girl was already. I was so proud of her, and I still am so proud of her, and I will continue to be there for her as she grows up to become a beautiful, compassionate, independent lady. I'm keeping in touch with my in-laws, who have always been very kind to me and to their granddaughter. Iris not only has me to guide her, but she also has 2 sets of wonderful, loving grandparents. Wish us luck, everyone.